You're watching TV 20. We are Cleveland.
Did you hear about the pony with a sore throat? He was a little horse. Can I tell you a cat joke? Just kidding. Why couldn't the Why was the basketball court all wet? Why? Because the players kept dribbling all over it. Where do cats go on vacation? New York.
Believe it or not, I usually go online and buy the author's book or, so this comes in the mail. Very first question she asked when I sat down to say hello tonight is, did you read the whole book? Most of it. Really, I did. This is just amazing. Now, this was your first book, correct?
Yes. I was very inspired.
And I'm going to hand this back over to you because she has a great story behind the book and what inspired her. So why don't you tell that one right off?
Okay, so, I had interviewed Mr. Stress, the band, before the Rock Hall was opening, and we were talking about how somebody should be documenting all this great history, right from the beginning with Alan Freed in the 50s. And so that planted a seed. Well, leading up to the Rock Hall opening, anybody go to the parade? Of the Rock Hall of, the launching.
Oh, a few hands, yeah.
That was like the best parade ever. It was so, they had the art department, just the people who made the displays, you had big balls rolling down East 9th for the Rolling Stones, to represent the Rolling Stones. Then they had people with these big colored doors walking around, to represent the doors. And it was just very... a parade I've never been to. So it was like really, we had national press coming in, and, they had all the dignitaries there, and I was just so pumped. I thought, got to do this book, but it was kind of daunting when you're thinking about, all that, because in that summer, there was always these articles.
Now, what year was that? What year
1995.
Was that?
It opened September 1st. And during that, leading up to that, in the summer, there was all these articles that I was reading, and I thought I knew a lot because I'm a Cleveland girl. I grew up with all that, but there was so much I didn't know, and I thought, I don't know if I could do it. Well, I go to L.A. a week after the parade, after I'm all gung-ho, and I pick up this alternative weekly magazine, L.A. Reader, and so I picked this up, and I start reading. There's an article about the Rock Hall. I thought, that's cool. No dancing in the museum, it's called. So I just want, and it's dissing not only the Rock Hall, but it's dissing Cleveland, and it really got my goat. So let me just read you a couple things that I read that got me going. Before saying anything about what the Hall of Fame is not and never can be, we should probably say what is most assuredly in its heart of hearts is a municipal works project, a bond-raising scam, a civic attempt to pump tourism into the withered heart of a dying Midwestern industrial city. I read little about how wonderful the hall is aesthetically, but comments from boosters about how swell it is for Cleveland abound. Okay, then my blood pressure is rising. So then it goes on, and then towards in the middle here, this is the kicker. And he says, I got no kick against anybody. First of all, this is a journalist. I got no kick. Learning more about the history of the music, which is deep, diverse, and abiding. But there are better ways of getting an education, and they don't involve a weekend in Cleveland, thank God.
Holy cow.
Okay. So I was fired up. So I type out this back then. I think, well, it was on a computer. Yes, it was. But a two-page letter to the editor. They printed part of it. And,
So you sent it to L.A. You got home, you read that.
The minute I got home, I read this, and then I thought, these people have no clue. So part of what my response was, excuse me, but where have you been, Mr. Working Journalist, because that's what he called himself. All over the world, there have been publicized accounts of IMP's 150,000 square foot structure with its aesthetically appealing triangular gas, blah, blah, blah. And it says, I said, moreover, this aptly titled comeback city may have been dying at one time, but that was more than 20 years ago. Today, this thriving, cultural, and fun, you bet, I put in parentheses, town certainly needs no $100 million building to boost its amenities. Anyone who actually has been here, italicized, okay, anybody who's actually been here at any time over the past 2 decades surely knows from where I speak. We've come a long way, Chris baby. Can your city, with its phenomenal traffic jams, oxygen-robbing layers of smog, and perpetual transients, make the same claim? I think not. And I went on, but, you know.
And look at this, guys. She was pissed off. What is it about this music that has just engaged you the way it must have engaged you?
Because I grew up in Cleveland, and with growing up with rock and roll in Cleveland, you lived, breathed, ate rock and roll. I mean, look at MMS. That, you know, from the moment you woke up in the morning, and it's a heyday, you would listen to, you know, all the DJs and, you know, and Kid Leo, and then you'd go to the concerts and you would see the big truck, you know, and then their merchandising was amazing, you know, as far as pumping it up, and people had buzzard tattoos, and you had bumper stickers, and you know, so it just was in my blood, you know, it was natural. So when I decided to go to fiction, I thought, well, you know, I'm kind of known as a rock pop writer, so I'm going to write a rock and roll novel. So then that became Peggy Sue Got Pregnant.
I was reading kind of a little bit of background on this. You conducted over 150 interviews for this book?
Actually, it ended up being 300.
300? Holy cow.
Yes.
Now, I mean, that's why it took you 4 years. Okay. But, you know, one of the things that I was just so impressed with is that number of interviews. I want to ask you right up front, do you have a most memorable? Do you have one that just kind of stands out as the craziest? Your husband's laughing.
I know. I have a lot of stories.
All right. I mean, but again, I'm looking for that one that was just the craziest.
You know, I don't know how crazy it was. It was just because a lot of people say, what was your best interview? What was your worst? And my best one was Hank LeConte, because even though by the time I interviewed him, he had had so many interviews in his life and told the same story about the history of the Agora. He was the founder of the Agora, and but he sat down and talked to me almost 2 hours as if he had never told that story before. You know, he was just still so passionate about his story and how he started. He was a jukebox guy, and he started, you know, he would bring the records for the jukebox. So he was another one that, you know, grew up loving music. So that was impressive. But Steve Popovich, God bless his soul, it's a great story because he scared the hell out of me when I went to see. He was a big guy. I don't know who know Popovich. Okay.
There you go.
So I was a freelancer. Nobody knew who I was. I couldn't call up and say, well, you know, I'm a reporter for the Cleveland Plain Dealer. So I didn't tell anybody I was writing a book when I would make the initial call. I just said, you know, I'm doing some history on Cleveland music, and Bill Randall was another one. So anyway, so I go to Papa, and his office was above the Agora, and I sat in, and you had the little kind of lobby, and he had the door open, and he's talking on the phone, and he's going, you know, those idiots, they don't know what they're doing, they're amateurs, and he's like screaming. I'm like, oh my God, I got to interview this guy. And so I went in his office, and of course, knowing, you know, I've had done many interviews, so you don't come and say, you know your stuff already. You know about the subject. You know what, and ask intelligent questions. But he just wasn't interested in talking about his history like Hank. So he just said, go in that closet. I have all my old articles, and of course I did that in the libraries. But he insisted on taking a scrapbook home. I'm like, oh my God, don't put that pressure on me. What if I lose it? Long story short. So he, after 10 minutes, he was like bored. So, but when I came back and gave it to him, and I let him read the whole piece, and we went through it together, making sure everything was accurate. And when it came out, he said, you did good. And he always, and to earn his respect, because he didn't, he had high standards for everybody. So that was kind of a great moment for me.
Outstanding. Who do you feel were some of the most important DJs in the history of Cleveland? And I agreed with this. It really did all start, everybody, of course, links it back to Alan Freed, but holy cow, there were a lot more DJs around town that over the years were critical to it. Tell some stories about some of those.
And you have to start with Alan Freed. And when my original thought was doing this book was just on the musicians. Which ones, not just the ones that made it big, but the ones that really impacted the city and had a huge fan base and all that. And their history was interesting. But you can't write about the bands without talking about the DJs who played the music that influenced them, or the clubs that they played, and it just kind of grew from there. And I thought, oh God, I got to start from the 50s. I thought I was going to start from the 70s, and it just kept growing. But Alan Freed was the first one that really got people excited, but then there was Mad Daddy and Bill Randall, who was not into rock and roll. Really, he was a pop DJ. He liked the straight, standards, but he actually brought a lot of musicians to the forefront because of his weekend New York radio show. So, like the Ponytails, they got a number one hit record on Billboard because he was taking them the records. And he says, it's like throwing fish into a barrel. He said, I just would take it and spin it on New York, and then all of a sudden it became, they got on Billboard. So, and Kid Leo, of course, and all the MMS, and John Gorman. I know he was here a few weeks ago, and I missed it. But he, his whole history and just how, again, every person that really made a big difference in our whole pop culture of Cleveland had such a great passion for it. They weren't just lukewarm about anything. They was like gung-ho, and I think that's what, and I think that makes a difference between this city and other cities that, maybe they just want to make money and just, get the bands out there, let them play and all that. But they were really into it, and they cared about their bands. Like Hank Lacani, did so much for the musicians.
Again, back to the DJs. Did you get to track any of these folks down and talk to them personally? And who was the biggest character in that group?
Oh, boy, it's kind of hard. I have them, like Jerry G, all the, like WHK and Wixie 1260 and WNCR. And, just, that's why the book's a big also, because when I started talking to them, I had to make separate chapters for the DJs of the 50s, the DJs of the 60s, 70s, 80s, 90s. And they each reflected the times, and no one really stood out. Bill Randall, I didn't want to interview him because everybody told me, he doesn't want to talk rock and roll, don't even bother. I'm like, well, I'm going to profile him. I have to talk to him. So I caught him in the morning. I thought there was one question that I had to ask. I don't remember what it was, and he was a lawyer. He had had an office, so I called him early in the morning. Was not prepared because I thought he's going to blow me off, but if I can get this question done. And when I said, well, I'm doing this little piece, and I just have this one question, and I understand you don't like to do interviews. Well, let me tell you why I don't like to do interviews. I caught him at a good time. He talked to me for 25 minutes, and I got more questions, and I'm like searching for my tape player. I'm like, oh my God, I got to get this guy keeps talking. And I even asked him about payola, which I was scared of, when they got paid to play, or they were, accused of getting paid to play.
What did he say about that?
He said he never, did, and most, they're not going to admit, and I don't think he did. He says, I played the music that I liked, and, but, I was always being offered Cadillacs and money and everything, but, and he wasn't on, he never, had, was accused like a lot of the other DJs were. But, I was kind of really happy that I got the interview, and it's still on tape. I still have it somewhere. So.
Now, again, you mentioned MMS, and we have had them for a topic. A lot of them are still around. Who did you get to talk to there? Like Kid Leo, did you get to?
Yeah, and just almost everybody from, that period, that great, exciting period. And it was so funny because by the time I saw them, interviewed a lot of the musicians and things that I thought, I wish I had been paying more attention when I was going to the concerts and I was doing, because, I would be going like, I was in college going to Viking Saloon and a band would be playing, but I wouldn't really necessarily pay attention to the band because it was a social time. You're talking, and I thought, boy, yeah, this band played. I probably saw them, but I don't remember. So I thought it made my research so much harder because I didn't have a memory of, like what that was.
Booze will do that. Anyways.
I didn't drink.
Alan Freed is credited with presenting the first rock concert with the
Moondog.
Yeah, with the Moondog Coordination Ball. Now, let's jump personal. You've probably seen a lot of concerts.
I was not at the Moondog Coordination Ball. Okay, I'm not quite that old.
But I mean, what are some of your favorite memories? Concerts that you saw, and it must have been what developed your passion. Mm-hmm. What are some of the concerts that you saw that really kind of said, this is what I kind of want part of my life? You made it a big part of your life.
Yeah, you're right. And, of course, it did start with the Rolling Stones at the Rubber Bowl and the World Series of Rock. Again, just all those really important concerts, and they weren't like in the front row even for smaller venues. But we had so many venues. But earlier, even before that, those teen clubs, the Hull Blues. How many went to the Hull Blues? And well, yeah. And because we had Alice Cooper and just so many big names playing these teen clubs really early in the day, where they were really Rod Stewart and Minner. I mean, you just had everybody. So yeah,
I was kind of jealous. I saw you actually saw some concerts at Euclid Beach Park.
Yes, that's
right.
Who
did you see at Euclid Beach?
Love and Spoonful. And actually, that was, I guess that would be a rock concert. But my grandmother had a cottage. She lived in Florida, and every summer she rented a cottage in Euclid Beach Park. And that's when they were having Bobby Sherman. I just remember that. Just all these little pop acts come and play. And the Love and Spoonful was used the cottage next to her as a dressing room. And I'm like 12, and they come out, and they're like, looking so cool. But then as I got closer to them, because my brother and I went and we got to meet them and talk to them, I thought, God, they're just like kids. They're like our age. I thought, because as a kid you think, there's so much more. Well, I had a big crush on Joe Butler, who was the drummer for that at that time, and I did get their autographs, and God knows where that is now. But 40 years later, I was invited to do a presentation on a rock and roll cruise with Three Dog Night and Love and Spoonful. And I got to hang out with Joe for a little bit. My husband and I were at the airport, and I said, I have to tell you, I have to confess, I had such a huge crush on you, and he goes, well, let's take our picture. It was just a great moment. It's just those little things. But yeah, so I saw other acts at Euclid Beach Park too, because that was really great to, it was just for kids, and it was a lot of the ones from the Upbeat show and all those little ones that you saw on TV, and yeah, so it was great.
Well, mine was Steppenwolf at Cleveland Auditorium, and then like 3 years later, I saw one of the last shows of Elvis at Cleveland Auditorium, and I'd gone away and came back to town for that show, and Elvis comes out on the stage, and everybody sits in their seats, just stays in their seats. So I walked right up front. I was literally standing about 4 feet from Elvis for that entire show. And folks, you might be asked this someday. Why do we have the right as Cleveland to say we're the home of rock and roll? And that is the answer. Yes, the first DJ to popularize it, Alan Freed, but MMS set the stage for rock stations out of Cleveland. First rock concert in Cleveland. One of the greatest promoters, rock concert promoters ever, Belkins, out of Cleveland. The list goes on and on in terms of, do we have the right to say that? Absolutely.